ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शांति 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 नमस्कार दोस्तों this is my fourth video on the book Final Talks by Annamalai Swami. I start with a question the devotee asks, but still I must keep up with the inquiry. Annamalai Swami, if you remain in the self, inquiry will not be necessary. If you move away from the self and go back to the mind, you then have to inquire again and go back to yourself. Question. To whom does this intensity to realize the self arise? It has to arise to the I that ultimately has to disappear. Annamalai Swami answers, who is this I? It is neither the body nor the mind. If you remain as the self, there is neither body nor mind. So what is this I? Inquire into it and find out for yourself. When you see the rope, what happens to the snake? Nothing happens to it because there never was a snake. Similarly, when you remain as the self, there is a knowing that this I never had any existence. All this is the self. You are not separate from the self. All is you. Your real state is the self, and in that self there is no body and no mind. This is the truth, and you know it by being it. This I am the body idea is wrong. This false idea must go, and the conviction I am the self should come to the extent that it becomes constant. At the moment, this I am the body idea seems very natural for you. You should work towards the point where I am the self becomes natural to you. It happens when the wrong idea of being the body goes, and when you stop believing it to be true, it vanishes as darkness vanishes when the sun appears. This life is all a dream within a dream, within a dream. We dream this world, we dream that we die and take birth in another body. And in this birth, we dream that we have dreamed. All kinds of pleasures and suffering alternate in these dreams, but a moment comes when waking up happens. In this moment, which we call realizing the self, there is the understanding that all the births, all the deaths, all the sufferings, and all the pleasures were natural dreams that have finally come to an end. Everyone has experienced dreams within dreams. One may dream that one has woken up from a dream, but that waking up is still happening within a dream. Our whole lives are dreams. When this dream life and a new one begins, there is no knowledge that both dreams are happening in the underlying dream of samsara. Bhagavan has instructed us in Who Am I to see the whole world as a dream. When realization comes, nothing will affect you because you will have the firm knowledge that all manifestation is an unreal dream. Question. When I was in Germany, I used to meditate in front of Bhagwan's picture and feel very peaceful. One day, while I was sitting as usual in front of Bhagwan's picture, a light started emerging from the eyes of Bhagwan. It flowed out of the photo and embraced me. Soon afterwards, I went into a peaceful, blissful, timeless state that I had never experienced before. I totally forgot about my body, time, and my surroundings. There was only peace and consciousness. That experience made such a deep impression on me, it created a strong yearning in me to regain the experience, but I never got it back. No matter how much I try, I never feel that I am getting any closer to it. How can I get this experience back? Annamalai Swami reply. By constant self-inquiry, who had the experience and who lost it? Who has the yearning to regain it? Who has all these thoughts about it? If you follow this approach, you will ultimately realize who you really are. The experience you had did not come from somewhere else. It is already within you. Find out who had the experience. Question. In order to do self-inquiry, we have to use the mind, which is mostly troublesome and in reality does not even exist. Why is this? Annamalai Swami replies, the mind that we use for self-inquiry is the pure mind, the sattvic mind. By using this sattvic mind, we do self-inquiry to remove the impure mind, which is rajas and tamas. If you keep on doing self-inquiry with the sattvic mind, ultimately this sattvic mind will be dissolved in the self. Question. Some time ago, I felt very depressed and could not get out of this state. One day, while I was doing Giri Pradakshina, which I do every day, I stopped on Bhagwan's bridge, the parapet wall of a culvert about 4 miles from Ramana, and started meditating on horizontal with closed eyes. Suddenly, the depression lifted and was replaced by peace. This depression has not returned. Annamalai Swami, the one who had the depression was not you. Your real nature is peace. Don't identify yourself with either the mind or with the depressed state it produces. These are not you. Question. After this depression left me, I found that I was always in a peaceful state. Soon afterwards, I met an Indian girl and fell in love with her. Sometimes the thought arises that I would like to marry this girl. Is it advisable to get married? Would it not be a hindrance to my sadhana? Annamalai Swami. Is this girl spiritually oriented? Question. Yes, she often goes to temple and reads spiritual books. Annamalai Swami. If the partner has progressed spiritually to the same extent that you have, it would be a great help. But if one partner is less interested in spiritual matters than the other, the one who has less interest will drag the other down, unless the more interested partner is spiritually very powerful. And in such a situation, there would always be quarrels and tension. If both partners have the same spiritual yearnings to realize the self, married life is okay. Otherwise, it is a hindrance. Question. How can we keep our sadhana in the middle of all our daily activities? It is very difficult. Annamalai Swami replies, Ramakrishna was once asked this question, and in reply he gave the example of a child who was playing by spinning round and round. If you do this, you will soon get dizzy and fall over. But if the same child spins round and round while holding firmly onto a post at arm's length, the child's grip on the post will keep him upright and prevent him from falling. On in this dizzy, spinning world of samsara, if you hold on to the post of the self, you will be able to stay upright and not fall over. I can give you another example. When you cut jackfruits open with your bare hands, there is an unpleasant milky liquid inside that sticks to your fingers and makes it very hard to take out the fruit. And afterwards, it takes hours to scrub it all off. However, if you put a little oil on your fingers before you start the work, this milk liquid will not bother you because it cannot stick to your oiled hands. Without some protection, contact with worldly matters can prove to be sticky and unpleasant. But if you oil yourself with remembrance of the self, you can move smoothly and efficiently through the world without having any of your business affairs stick to you or cause you any trouble or inconvenience. When there is a remembrance of the self, everything in life proceeds smoothly and there is no attachment to the work that is being done. Question. While you were doing a lot of work in the ashram, how did you manage to keep up your sadhana? Annamalai Swami. In those days, Bhagwan was accessible for most of the time, so I was able to get regular guidance in my sadhana. He told me to read Sivananda Lahiri, Elam Andre, Updesasram, and his other writings. He also told me to do prayana, chanting of scriptural works. All this was very helpful in keeping my mind on the self during work. Sri Bhagwan often said, while doing the work, don't have the idea I am doing the work. If you can keep up this attitude, work will not be a burden and no problem will touch you. Don't differentiate between work and meditation. If you don't differentiate, every job you do becomes meditation. And don't make distinction between different kinds of work. Don't think this is a good work, that is a bad work. If you treat all work equally and work you do will be beneficial for your sadhana. Question. We have to live in the world and deal with people, many of whom will try to take advantage of us. Being quiet and detached is one thing, but should we be so quiet and uninterested that we allow other people to take advantage of our passivity? Annamalai Swami replies, you can be quiet within and be tough on the outside if that is the role you have to play in the world. There is a story about a snake that lived under a bush by the side of the street. Whenever people passed the bush, the snake made a lot of noise and tried to bite them. It gave a lot of trouble to anyone who came near. One day, a passing sadhu passed the bush and the snake, as usual, put on an aggressive show of behavior. The sadhu, who could communicate with animals, said, keep quiet and don't bite people. You don't have to behave like this. Live a peaceful life and don't trouble and people who walk past. Don't trouble the people who walk past. The snake heeded the advice and from that day on its behavior completely changed. It sat quietly under its bush and never troubled any one of the people who walked past. Within a few days, the local people realized that the snake was no longer a threat to them, but instead of being relieved, they would throw stones at the snake or try to chase it away. People have this instinctive response to snakes. Whenever they see one, they feel compelled to commit some act of violence against it. The snake ignored the provocation for a while, but it soon realized that this new state of affairs was not an improvement on the previous one. A few days later, the sadhu came by and asked how the snake's new lifestyle was going. Not so good, responded the snake. I am suffering a lot on account of your advice. I am being very calm and I am not giving any trouble to anyone. But because of my calmness and sadhu like behavior, people are taking advantage of me by throwing stones at me and harassing me. They would never do this before because they knew I might retaliate and bite them. The sadhu thought about this for some time and then spoke. I advised you to be calm and not trouble anyone, but that doesn't mean that you have to sit here passively while people come along and hurt you. When people come to cause you trouble in future, just pretend that you are going to bite them. You can be angry on the outside, but on the inside you can still be calm. From then on, the snake adopted the new tactic of hissing at everyone who came past his bush just to let them know that he was still a potential threat. This was enough to make people give him a wide berth. We can all be like this if circumstances demand it. There are occasions when a show of anger is needed. We can play the role of being angry, but at the same time, we can know that we are just acting out a role that is needed at a particular moment. Internally, we can be peaceful while all this is going on. Annamalai Swami answers. The same reply continues. Gyanis usually come to their last births with a mountain of punyas on account of what they have done in their previous lives. The jnani cannot experience all these punyas himself, but those who come into contact with him can receive them as blessings. The same thing can be said for all the papams that the jnani bring to his final life. A poor man can suddenly become rich if a millionaire takes a liking to him and give him a lot of money. Those who come to a jnani and do selfless service to him find themselves becoming spiritual millionaires when they receive the Jnani's unused punyas. And those who come to abuse and insult the Jnani end up receiving all his unused papams. This is an automatic process. The Jnani does not pick and choose the people who are going to be the recipients of these punyas. This transfer happens automatically. Devotees grow spiritually by receiving all these blessings. They reach heights that would be difficult or impossible to reach through their own efforts. My own life illustrates this. When I was very young, I stayed alone, doing all kinds of spiritual practice by myself. I doubt that I could have experienced the truth of the self through my own efforts. Fortunately, grace brought me to Bhagwan, and through Bhagwan's grace, I had the opportunity to serve him. My proximity to Bhagwan and the work I did for him made me ready for the truth. I learned this lesson about the necessity of being in the Jnani's presence early on in my time at Ramana's Ramam. After a few weeks there, I found myself disappointed by the attitude of many of the people I found around Bhagwan. They seemed to be more interested in gossiping than in doing meditation. I knew that Bhagwan was a great man, but I did not feel comfortable living with people whom I thought were not taking the spiritual life very seriously. I decided to leave the ashram and meditate by myself. My attempt to run away was not successful. Bhagwan's grace and power brought me back from Polur, the place I had run away to. As I sat in front of Bhagwan on my first day back, Bhagwan looked at me, and while he was looking, I began to hear the words of one of the verses from Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham resonating in my heart. The supreme state which is praised and which is attained here in this life by clear inquiry, which rises in the heart when association with the sadhu is gained, is impossible to attain by listening to preachers, by studying and learning the meanings of the scriptures by virtuous deeds or by any other means. I had never read this work before, so I don't know How these words managed to repeat themselves inside me. No one else heard them except me. The words praises association with the Jnani, saying that association with such a being is far more productive for sadhaks than doing spiritual practice by oneself. After hearing these words, I got the courage to stay on at Ramanasramam and serve Bhagwan. Question. You said that by serving a Jnani one could receive his unused punyas as a blessing. Does one not need a lot of punyas of one's own merely to have the opportunity to meet a Jnani and serve him? It is not just a question of good luck. Annamalai Swami, yes, one of our saints has written a verse to this effect. Those who have accumulated punyas in many lives, those who have purified their minds to some extent, those who have made a big spiritual effort over many lives, these kinds of virtuous souls will get association with a realized Guru, and by his grace they will come to realize the truth. If you want to get out hot, you have to go near a fire. If you want water, you have to go to a well. And if you want grace to realize the self, you will have to go to a jnani. Bhagwan would occasionally quote a verse from Kabbalah Navanita that says, the immemorial Vedas declare that single-minded devotion to a holy sage is not only pleasing to Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva together, but also secures the rewards of all the Vedic rites and finally liberation from the cycle of birth. After my first attempt to run away, I never left Bhagwan again. I never went anywhere else to do my spiritual practices. I just listened to what my Guru told me and I carried out his instructions to the best of my ability. Then one day in the hall, Bhagwan turned to me and said, your karmas are over. I had this great opportunity to surrender to a Guru like Bhagwan, to trust him and to serve him. It did not happen through my own efforts. This kind of thing happens very rarely. For being such a Bhagwan don't appear very often. For beings such as Bhagwan don't appear very often. If you want to learn, you have to go to school. If you want jnana, you have to go to a jnani. I want to speak some more about the grace of the Guru. Bhagwan told me that the Guru is the self who is within. The self manifests in a form and pushes the minds of the devotees toward the self. At the same time, the Guru resides within us as the unmanifest self. From the inside, he is pulling us towards him. This pushing and pulling is the Guru's grace. For the Guru's grace to work on us, we have to surrender. We have to give up all the things of this world and all the other worlds and direct all our attention toward the self. If we want anything in this world or the next, our energy will be dispersed in these desires, and to fulfill these desires, we shall have to reborn again and again. I once told Bhagwan that I had a desire to go and live in a cave where I could do meditation by myself. Bhagwan told me, if you keep a desire like that in your mind, you will have to take one more birth. Why keep such a desire? If it is destined for you, it will happen by itself. Leave this idea alone. So give up all your desires, your likes, dislikes, and preferences. If you are truly the whole, which part of yourself will you like or dislike? To strengthen my resolve, Bhagwan would sometimes tell me inspiring stories of service and devotion from the lives of other great teachers. He twice told me about Virupakshadeva and Namasivaya, two great beings who lived on Arunachala several centuries ago. These two served their Guru in Karnataka very faithfully for many years. At the end of this period, the Guru sent both of them to Arunachala and told them to meditate there. They came here and picked different spots for their tapas. Virupakshadeva sat in the cave that is now named after him, and Gohai Nama Shivaya picked a cave that was further down the hill. They both attained liberation after years of meditating here. Eventually, they attracted the devotees of their own and started ashrams here. Perhaps Bhagwan told me this story because he knew that it was my destiny to be sent to meditate myself after many years of service. If a disciple serves a guru, the guru does not gain anything from it, but the disciple by his service becomes purified and fit to receive the truth. A ship may be taking you to the other shore of the ocean, but the ship itself is not gaining anything from you. There is one more verse that I want to quote for you. It was sung by Manika Vachagar, whose supreme devotion to Shiva enabled him to realize the self. Bhagwan often quoted Manika Vachagar's poems to us. I gave myself to you. In return, you must give yourself to me. So, in this business of giving and taking, who is the real winner? In our transactions, I received limitless ananda from you. But what did you get from me? Nothing. Just a useless ego. So, now you are residing in my heart. What more do I need? I have become fulfilled. I need nothing because you are in my heart. Manika Vachagar could sing like this because Shiva himself was residing within him as his own reality. His desires were fulfilled, he needed nothing. Annamalai Swami further says, in the 1930s, I received a telegram stating that my father had passed away. I reported the fact to Bhagwan and asked, please give him moksha, liberation. Bhagwan nodded and said yes. Soon afterwards, Chinna Swami asked me to take a bath because in our Hindu tradition, when either our father or mother dies, we have to take a purific purificatory bath. I told Chinna Swami, my father has not died. Bhagwan is my father. He is still here. The man who has just died was the father in my last birth. My father in this birth is Bhagwan, my Guru. I don't need to take a bath. There is another Hindu tradition surrounding death. If anyone dies in the family, we don't take food until the body has been disposed of. When Bhagwan's mother died at Sakandasram, Bhagwan ignored this rule, saying, Mother is not dead, let us eat. In this case, there was no ritual pollution involved because his mother had realized the self in her final moments. In such circumstances, the usual rules on bathing and fasting do not apply. There were other Hindu dietaries rule. Uh, Hindu dietary rules that Bhagwan sometimes ignored. When there is a solar or lunar eclipses, we are not supposed to cook or eat. On one such occasion, Bhagwan said, come on, let us take our food as usual. We don't have to worry about this eclipse. Some of the Brahmins who were more strict about obeying these sorts of rules were afraid to break their lifetime habits, but the rest of us went with Bhagwan and ate our food with him. After Bhagwan's mother died in 1922, Bhagwan continued to live at Sakandasram for several months. Then one day he went down the hill to his mother's samadhi and stayed there. Some power, some Shakti compelled him to go down the hill and abandon Sakandasram. Soon afterwards, Sakandasram was robbed and the thieves took cooking pots and a few other things away. Up till then, some of the devotees had been staying at Sakandasram to guard the place and the few things that were left there. But after this step, it was more or less abandoned and everyone moved down the hill and stayed there. Many people came to serve Bhagwan food there, and the items that were lost were soon replaced by donations from the visiting devotees. In the beginning, it was very primitive. Everyone, including Bhagwan, slept outside by a mango tree. The first building was a mud hut with a thatched roof that was erected over the site of Mother Samadhi. I came along a few years later at a time when the ashram was beginning to expand and put up new buildings. All these buildings were erected on the basis of plans that had been done by Bhagwan. In those days, cement was not available and we had to use a mortar made out of lime. I was very sensitive to chemicals in the mixture. I was always getting allergic reactions to them. Every morning I would wake up with pus oozing out of my eyes. I had to work outside in the heat all day and my body felt like it was overheating even during the cool of the evening. Bhagwan taught me how to prepare a special mixture made out of coconut oil, sesame oil, and castor oil. He told me that if I applied this mixture to my feet in the evening, it would take away this feeling of overheating. I tried it and it worked very well. Up till then, I had found it hard to sleep at night on account of this feeling of heat that was always in my body. After I started applying this mixture, I always had a good night's sleep. At some point while I was serving Bhagwan, the ashram acquired the house in Tiruchoji where Bhagwan was born. Chinna Swami asked me to go there and do some construction work on the old house. He wanted to turn it into some kind of temple. I did not want to leave Bhagwan, so I told Chinna Swami I have completed all my temple worshipping and my bathing in holy waters in my previous birth. That's why I have come to Bhagwan now. I don't need these activities anymore. Chinna Swami did not pursue this matter with me and I never went to Trichuji. I had enough punyas to come to Bhagwan and receive his grace because I had done all these things in other lives. The charitable works, the good actions, the temple rituals, etc., that I had done in my past lives earned me the right to come to Bhagwan's presence to stay there and serve him. They had served their purpose and I did not need them anymore. All these ritual activities lost their appeal for me within a few days of encountering Bhagwan and his teaching. Question. In Swami's book, I read that he liked to drink the water that had been left in Bhagwan's cup. This is more kind of ritual that he persisted with long after he came to Ramana. Does Swamiji make a distinction between ordinary rituals and accepting leftovers from the Guru? Annamalai Swami. When I worked in the ashram, I used to drink the water with which Bhagwan had washed his hands. I would get this water 2 or 3 times a day. Even after moved at Palakotu, I still occasionally drank this water because Mudaliar Patti sometimes used to bring it to me. She knew that I liked this water and she knew that I had been accustomed to drinking it. Sundaram translating. I once asked Swamiji why he was so attached to drinking this water. He said that it was on account of a story he had read when he was still living in his village. The story was about a sage called Patinathar who lived with his disciple Badrigiriyar, Badragiriyar in a village called Tiruvidamrudur. Tiruvidamrudur. Annamalai Swami, continuing the story. Every day these two used to give their leftover food to a dog. Sometime later this dog died and took birth as a princess in the household of the king of Banaras. When she grew up, the king wanted to arrange her marriage, but she refused, saying that instead of marrying, she wanted to see a sage called Pata- Patinadar, who lived in Tiruvidai Marudur. Seeing how determined she was, the king himself agreed to take her to see this man. As soon as she arrived there, Patinathar recognized her and told his disciple that in her previous life she had been the dog that had been given their leftover food. Then Patinathar added, she will become enlightened because she ate that food. The disciple found this whole story hard to believe. How can a dog take birth as a human being? He asked. And how can she get enlightened merely on account of having eaten this food? Patinathar answered, I will show you, and then proceeded to walk to a nearby Shiva temple. The princess and the disciple followed. As they stood together inside the temple, Shiva appeared in front of them in the form of light. The light engulfed both the disciple and the princess and absorbed them into itself. Patinathar was left standing alone. He asked Shiva, I am all alone in this world now. Please tell me how I can also merge with you. Shiva replied, take this bitter tasting sugarcane with you and visit my temple. Each time you visit a temple, taste the sugar cane. If it tastes very sweet there in the temple, you will attain samadhi and become one with me. Patinathar followed these instructions and visited many temples, but during this period, which lasted many years, each time he tasted the sugarcane in these places, it always tasted bitter. Finally, he arrived at Tiruvanantiyar, a small town near Madras. He bit into the sugarcane, and in the moment that its sweet taste touched his tongue, he attained Mahasamadhi and physically disappeared. It was the memory of this story that made me want to drink Bhagwan's leftover water. In 1930s, while I was still serving Bhagwan in the ashram, I developed a severe stomach ache. One of Bhagwan's doctor devotee decided to take me to Madras for a checkup. I was examined there, but the cause of the stomach ache was not found. As I was about to return to the ashram, I remembered the story of Patinathar and decided to visit the temple at Truvantiyar on my way home. I had heard from other people that when Patinathar dematerialized in the temple, he left a Shiva lingam behind. When I went to pay homage to him in his Samadhi temple, I saw that this lingam was still there. Question. During deep meditation, peace is there all the time, but there is still a feeling that peace is something that can come and go. I know that this is just an idea, but I want to eliminate this idea and have the direct experience of the peace that never comes and goes. Bhagwan says, you are always the self. It is just your notion that you are not the self that has to be got rid of. How does this happen? Annamalai Swami. The self is peace and happiness. Realizing peace and happiness within you is the true realization of the self. You cannot distinguish between peace, happiness, and the self. They are not separate aspects. You have this idea that peace and happiness is within you. So you make some effort to find it there, but at the moment it is still only an idea for you. So ask yourself, to whom does this idea come? Who has this idea? You must pursue this line if you want to have the idea replaced by the experience. Peace is not an idea, nor is it something that comes and goes. We are always that, so remain as that. You have no birth and no death, no bondage and no freedom. It is perpetual peace and it is free from all ideas. The I am the body idea is what is concealing it. This is what has to go. Question. So, the notion of being the body and the mind comes back and covers the experience. Annamalai Swami. Yes, yes. This idea, I am the body, is not there during sleep. Everyone enjoys sleeping, and the reason we enjoy it is because there are no thoughts there. It is the thoughts that arise subsequently that cause us all our trouble. There is no separate entity during sleep because no thought has arisen to create the image of one. When walking comes, this first rising thought, I am the body, brings separation, doubts, and confusion. If you can be without it in the waking state, there will be the knowledge, I am Ramana, I am Arunachala. Everything is myself, Rama, Krishna, etc. are all you. It is just this limiting, I am the body, thought that keeps this knowledge, this awareness from you. In the waking state, the jnani has no limiting thoughts, no ego that identifies with a name and a form. His state is crystal clear. Ramana Bhagwan had no ego, no limiting thoughts, which is why he knew himself to be this peace, this happiness. Question. How can we avoid getting attached to the form of the Guru, to his personality, and to the place where the Guru lives? Annamalai Swami. If you completely avoid attachment to your body and mind, then all other attachments will vanish. Identify with that which is neither body nor mind, and all your attachments will go. You can only put your attention on one thing at a time. While it is on the mind or the body, it cannot be on the self. Conversely, if you put attention on the self and become absorbed in it, there will be no awareness of mind and body. Even night, every night during sleep, you let go of your attachment to both the body and the mind, and the result is silence, peace, and an absence of duality. You can have this silence, this peace, and this absence of duality in the waking state by not relieving the rising thoughts that create duality for you. Resist limiting thoughts. Replace them with the thoughts such as all is myself, everything is myself, all animals, all things are myself. What you think, you become. If you understand and experience that everything is yourself, how can you have likes and dislikes? If everything is you, there will be no desire to avoid anything, no impulse to discriminate in favor of anything. If you want to discriminate at all, avoid bad company and bad thoughts. At night, when you suddenly start to experience the cold, you pull a blanket over yourself. Pull the blanket of discrimination over yourself when you feel that there is a possibility of bad company and bad thoughts dragging you down. You may need to do this, but the Jnani will not, because nothing can ever drag him back into the realm of false identifications again. He will always be in that state in which he knows everything to be himself. He will never again have the idea that anything is different or apart from his own self. Annamalai Swami continuing, Bhagwan watched me very closely in the years that I served him in the ashram. One time I went to the mother's temple where many people were talking about worldly matters. Bhagwan called me back saying, why should you go to that crowd? Don't go to crowded places. If you move with the crowd, their vasanas will infect you. Bhagwan always encouraged me to live a solitary life and not mix with other people. That was the path he picked for me. Other people got different and advice that was equally good for them. But while he actively discouraged me from socializing, he also discouraged me from sitting quietly and meditating during the years that I was working in the ashram. In this period of my life, if Bhagwan saw me sitting with my eyes closed, he would call out to me and give me some work to do. On one of these occasions, he told me, "Don't sit and meditate, it will be enough if you don't forget that you are the self. Keep this in your mind all the time while you are working. This sadhana will be enough for you. The real sadhana is not to forget the self. It is not sitting quietly with one's eye closed. You are always the self. Just don't forget it." Bhagwan's way does not create a war between the mind and the body. He does not make people sit down and fight the mind with closed eyes. Usually, when you sit in meditation, you are struggling to achieve something, fighting to gain control over the mind. But Bhagwan did not advise us to engage in this kind of fight. He told us that there is no need to engage in a war against the mind because mind does not have any real fundamental existence. This mind, he said, is nothing but a shadow. He advised me to be continuously aware of the self while I did the ordinary things of everyday life, and in my case, this was enough. If you understand the self and be that self, everything will appear to you as your own self. No problems will ever come to you while you have this vision, because you are all and all is the self. Choices about liking or disliking will not arise. If you put on green tinted glasses, everything you see will appear to be green. If you adopt the vision of the self, everything that is seen will be the self and self alone. So these were Bhagwan's teachings for me. If you want to understand the self, no formal sadhana is required. You are always the self. Be aware of the self while you are working. Convince yourself that you are the self and not the body or the mind, and always avoid the thought, "I am not the self." Avoid thoughts that limit you, thoughts that make you believe that you are not the self. I once asked Bhagwan, "You are at the top of the hill. You have reached the summit of spiritual life, whereas I am still at the bottom of the hill. Please help me to reach the summit." Bhagwan answered, "It will be enough if you give up the thought I am at the bottom of the hill. If you can do this, there will be no difference between us. It is just your thoughts that are convincing you that I am at the top and you are at the bottom. If you can give up this difference, you will be fine." Don't adopt attitudes such as these that automatically assume that you are limited or inferior in any way. On another occasion, I asked Bhagwan, "Nowadays, many people are crossing big oceans by plane in very short periods of time. I would like Bhagwan to find us a good device, a Jnana airplane that can speedily transport us to moksha." This time Bhagwan replied, "We are both traveling in a Jnana airplane, but you don't understand this." In this answer to me, Bhagwan would never let me fall into the false belief that I was separate or different from him, or that I was a person with a mind and a body who needed to do something to reach some exalted spiritual state. Whenever I asked him questions that were based on assumptions such as these, he would show me the error that was implicit in the question and gently point me back to the truth, the self. He would never allow me to entertain wrong ideas. Question: what other questions did Swamiji ask during his early days at Ramana? Annamalai Swami replies, When I first came to Bhagwan, I used to ask questions about liberation, what is bondage, what is freedom, and so on. Vrugnar, who was sitting next to me on one of these occasions, laughed and said, "This body doesn't even know what liberation is and what bondage is." I think he was amused by the innocence of my inquiries. After I began serving Bhagwan, I listened very attentively to all the philosophical explanations that he gave. I also talked to Chadwick and other devotees about various aspects of Vedanta. I gradually absorbed the teachings until a point came where I could say that I had a good working knowledge of Bhagwan's teachings and the various other systems that were being discussed in his presence. In one of his later songs, Murugnar wrote about Bhagwan. You make wise people of those who come to you in an ignorant state. This is the grace of Ramana. I always felt that this was a reference to me. It was not easy in the beginning when I first came to the ashram. I was so forgetful. I rarely remembered anything that Bhagwan said because I was so forgetful. I used to keep a paper and pencil and write down whatever Bhagwan was saying. I felt that my forgetfulness was a hindrance to observing Bhagwan's teaching. So one day I approached him and said, "Bhagwan, my memory is very bad. Could you please bless me with a good one?" Bhagwan looked into my eyes for a few minutes without saying anything. From that day on, my memory became very clear and sharp, so much so I gave up carrying my pencil and paper. A woman on a pilgrimage stopped off to visit Annamalai Swami and asked for his blessings and advice. Annamalai Swami reacts. Don't forget yourself wherever you go. If you can manage this, you will not need anything else. A student once came to Bhagwan and told him that he wanted to go for further education. Bhagwan told him, "This education is good for you. Study more, but at the same time, study the person who is studying. Study yourself." One of the old Siddhas, Tamil poet saints who lived about 1000 years ago, composed a song. I yearned for and searched for the truth. I ran everywhere looking for it. I wasted my life, my time, and my energy looking everywhere for this truth. So much time was wasted in this pursuit. I have grown old and am about to die, but finally I have understood that the truth light is within myself. You are going to different places on a pilgrimage, but what you are really looking for is yourself. You cannot achieve success in this by going on external searches because you yourself are the one that is being looked for. Your real nature is peace. Forgetting this, you have lost your peace and you are searching in the outside worlds where there is no peace to be found. This is the teaching of Bhagwan, my Guru. I am passing it on to you. You must understand who you are and what you are, and then you must remain as that. If you can manage this, this itself will suffice. Right now, you are under the impression that you are your body and your mind, but the truth is you are the self. Let go of the I that you imagine yourself to be and catch hold of the real I that is the self. What do you hope to gain from your pilgrimage, from going here and there in an external journey? You are holding on to the idea that you are your body and your mind. Having assumed this, you are now looking for an external God so that you can worship Him. Though such worship may be beneficial, it will not take you beyond the realm of the mind. While you hold on to the idea that you are a person inside a body, whatever you see will be a manifestation of your own mind. You cannot transcend the mind by worshipping your own external projections. All these external appearances that you see in front of you are Maya. They have no fundamental abiding reality. To find the self, to find what is true and real, you have to look inside yourself. You have to find the source, the place where all these mental projections arise. You are looking for satisfaction in the outside world because you think that all these objects you see in front of you are real, they are not. The reality is the substratum in which they all appear. This is what you should be seeking instead of looking for external gods in the different pilgrimage places. An elephant is made out of wood. If we see it as wood, it is wood. But if we get caught up in the name and form, we will see only an elephant and forget that it is underlying nature is wood. All is your own self. This form is different, that form is different, this is more powerful, this is worse. These are all judgments you make when you see separate objects instead of having the true vision that all is an undifferentiated oneness. There may be different varieties of light bulbs, but the current that activates and sustains them is the same. You must learn to become one with this activating current and unmanifest self, and not get caught up in all the names and forms that appear in it. Here is another verse from one of the Siddhas. Because of your ego, you are going to the forest to look for spiritual light. You are looking for this darshan of light in Badrinath and other Himalayan pilgrimage places. These things are the illusion of the mind. They depend on the states of the mind and the functioning of the mind. That which you are searching for is within yourself. Bhagwan wrote in Ulladunarpadu verse 11, knowing all else without knowing oneself, the knower of objects known is nothing but ignorance. How instead can it be knowledge? All the information the mind accumulates and all the experience it collects are ignorance, false knowledge. Real knowledge cannot be found in the mind or in any external location. The mind sees through colored glasses, and what it sees is tinted and tainted by that color. If your mind is in a spoiled and disturbed condition, the entire world will appear to be in a spoiled and disturbed condition. If your mind is crystal clear, everything will appear to you to be clear and peaceful. Your most important objective must be realizing the self. If you have not done this, you will spend your time in ignorance and illusion. Your mind, this world, they are all Maya. Don't become a slave to this Maya. Instead, realize the self and let Maya become your servant. I have just remembered another verse from the Siddhas. Many people have struggled years together to realize the self. Millions and millions of people have struggled looking for the light outside themselves. If these millions and millions of people have died without understanding the self that is within them, it is because they did not understand the real path. You must find someone who has followed the right path, someone who has discovered this inner truth for himself and who stabilized himself there. Such a one will give you good advice. He will not send you out on unproductive adventures in the outside world. Following the advice of someone who has not reached this state is simply a case of the blind leading the blind. Neither knows the right path, and both will eventually fall into a big hole. You may find a fruit that is very bitter and decide to improve its flavor.